everyone, this is Jason. I want to welcome you to the Mosaic Church podcast. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. No matter where you are on your faith journey, I hope the following message encourages and inspires you to take a new step on our calling to love God, love others, and to go change the world. Enjoy.
Morning, Mosaic fam. How are you guys doing? Good? I feel like we should be doing a little bit better than that after 50 degrees on a day in February in Wisconsin. Hopefully you guys were able to get outside and enjoy some of the sunshine yesterday. My name is Ashley Thomas, and I am on the teaching team here at Mosaic. During the week, I am the CEO of Hope Street, which is one of the ministry partners here. And I just love getting to be able to be here with you guys. I spent the last couple of weeks, the women had a group. We were going through Galatians, and it was just super fun getting to meet some more people and get to know people on a deeper level than just saying hi and bye on a Sunday. So good to be here this morning. We are in a series called The Christian Life, and today we are going to talk about suffering a day after Valentine's Day. I'll let you read into that however you want. I didn't come up with it, thank Jason, but we are diving into the book of Job. And I don't know about for you guys, but oftentimes Job, when I do like a read through the Bible in a year type program thing, Job is usually the book that I struggle with because I feel like there's so much dialogue. There's all of this like back and forth. You have friends that are trying to be helpful but aren't really helpful. You have Job reminding us of what's true of God, but also really struggling. It feels like it's 42 chapters of watching someone's deep suffering. And we just don't do well with being steeped in suffering, right? We want life to be joyful. We want to be happy. We want to experience the fruit that we know that God has for us, but sometimes life finds us in a season of suffering. This morning, we're focusing just on the first 2 chapters of Job, and I'm going to give you a recap because I don't want to read all those verses to you, but what we see in this passage is that we are filled in on who Job is and all that he has going for him. We see that he has a lot of land, he has a large family, he has an abundance of resources. Life is going really well for Job. We then get this glimpse of this conversation that we see is in heaven between the Lord and Satan. And there's 2 different scenarios. The first one is Satan says, okay, have you tried taking everything away from Job? But he still praise you and think you were so great if he didn't have all the things that he has. God allows that to happen, and then he comes back and he's like, well, you haven't touched his body. Maybe if you touched his body, then he still wouldn't praise you. So we get this glimpse of this conversation, these boundaries that God sets up for what Satan is allowed to do and not do. But what was most profound in this passage, and probably these first 2 chapters are probably my favorite and throughout the whole book, because we see how Job worships God. In fact, his first point, when we read in 1, verses 20 through 21, it says, "At this Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, 'Naked I came from my father's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised.'" So we see this man, he has just had all of these things simultaneously stripped from him. And the first thing he does is he bows down. We anticipate the grieving, right? Tears his robe, but he bows down and he worships God. And he says, I know what is true of God, right? And that's the thing that gives him hope, even in this most horrible, horrific moment. He finds his ability to be able to worship God. Now, in this part of Job, we see his friends practice the ministry of presence, and this is not something that they do really well later on, but we get a glimpse of what it could look like. What does it actually look like and mean to walk alongside people as they grieve, as they suffer, through just simply the ministry of presence, which, just so you know, means you're probably not opening your mouth. Now, the key point for us to remember today is that suffering is not always a result of sin. Sometimes it is part of a larger, unseen spiritual reality in which God remains sovereign and worthy of our trust. Now, I have a few extra points than normal. If you guys have been here when I've taught before, I kind of always operate in 3 points because it feels like it's really easy to remember. But there was so much here this week that I actually have 5 points today, so we're going to dive right in. But the first one is the reality of righteous suffering. Now, godly people are not exempt from suffering. We see that Job is described as blameless and upright. We know that he is one who feared God. He followed after him. And we also know that he's one that turned away from evil. In fact, in this passage, we see how he is spiritually interceding on behalf of his children. Anytime his kids were getting a little bit off track, and he was praying on behalf of them and ushering them back into the presence of God, saying, this is how you ought to live life. This is what it looks like to follow the Lord. And yet righteousness did not shield him from pain. My son is obsessed with the movie David right now, the cartoon version. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It is very well done. The music in it is phenomenal. I'm actually not even sick of the music, and it's on repeat, every single song. But one of the songs in it is Why God, and it's when David is actually being chased out by Saul. Saul has realized that David has actually been anointed to be the next king, and he had taken him into his household as another son. He was really close with his son Jonathan. And David is like, God, I am doing what you said to do. I've chosen to be obedient to what you said you wanted me to do, and now my very life is threatened. And so he's like, why, God? And we see this throughout the Psalms. David is a really great example of God can handle anything about how you're feeling, and it's okay. And I'm throwing this example in there because I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that obedience sometimes flies in the face of sin. And that can be really hard because David was doing all of the right things, but when you have someone who's maybe walking in sin or hasn't yet decided to choose to deliberately follow Christ, your obedience could be the thing that just flares up, whatever it is that their agenda is. And so sometimes we have suffering because of other people's poor choices. So we see in that story that Saul was angry. He didn't want to give up his position as king, and so his sin affected David. Now, going back and forth between those two, and I'm going to go back to Job here, the main difference, I think, is that Job really focused in on who God is and worshiping him. And David knew who God was, but he really wanted to, he worshiped through, I'm going to tell you what this feels like. And Job doesn't give us a lot of that insight into that, but David does. And so if you're ever feeling like you can't say what you want to say to God in the midst of your suffering, I just challenge you to read through the Psalms. But for us, faithfulness does not have to guarantee, it's not going to guarantee a trouble-free life. But suffering is not always punishment. I think sometimes in the church, and we are always well-intentioned, at least I like to think so, but we have this very simplistic theology that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. And that's just not true. It just simply is not true. And so I just want you to remember that as we're living in a broken world, suffering is inevitable. But even as we suffer, we can remember and point to a God that is sovereign, who is in the midst of it all and always gives us the sufficient amount of grace and his peace that we need to continue to persevere through until he returns. Now, second point here is the unseen spiritual dimensions of suffering. So there is more happening than we can see. And I think we know this on in our head sometimes, but we just don't always like to think about it. Because we like to think that we can have all the answers and have the picture, kind of pull back the veil, right? Wizard of Oz, and be able to see who's actually in charge here. What are they doing? But there's always more happening than we can see. As we got a glimpse into this conversation between the Lord and Satan, we see how what's happening in heaven is affecting down what's happening on earth. And Satan's challenging Job's motives. He's like, hey, does Job fear God for nothing? Kind of seems like you've given him everything that he could ever want or need. It's probably pretty easy for him to follow after you. And as I was reading through that, I was like, what is like for your own life, like my own, what does that look like for me? Like, is it easier for me to worship and praise God when things are going really well? Or is it the opposite? When things are really hard, that I realize how much I need him and his faithfulness to step into my situation. I guess just reflect on that for yourself in terms of like, when am I seeking him? And when am I worshiping him? When am I thanking him? When am I calling out to him? There is always something else going on behind the scenes, beyond just what you can see. Are you inviting God to intercede on your behalf? Because he can actually see this whole thing where it's like you're focused on this small little thing, and it's like, oh, this is this little part of this huge story that we're all a part of. And it's like he's fighting this battle over here, and you can't see it yet because it hasn't yet trickled down to affect what you're encountering. But it doesn't mean that God's not moving. It doesn't mean that God's not faithful, that he's not sovereign, that he's not working on your behalf. But when I say that, I think even that sometimes gets misconstrued because we think if God's working on my behalf, he's going to work this out in the way that I want it to be. And the ladies, we just finished through Galatians, and we finished the series with going through the fruits of the Spirit. And sometimes the thing that's going to change, the thing that God is working out for you is new fruit. Is this new opportunity for you to grow in your perseverance and long-suffering, is for you to grow in your peace and in your joy, no matter what life looks like. Those are the things that actually minister to the people that you come in contact with. Are you a person that actually is living out the Spirit? Like you are living in the Spirit. You are living out God's truth. It's not just something that you say, but people can actually see it before you've ever said it because your life reflects the very thing that you say you believe. Now, in this passage too, God's allowing testing, but he sets boundaries. I think that's important to remember because we know that God is still the one that has the most control. He's given Satan an opportunity to roam on the land here in this time and age and do the things that he wants to do, but he's not able to do whatever he wants to do. And as I was thinking through this, I sat down. We had a prayer meeting, we have a weekly prayer meeting actually at Hope Street every week on Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and you're always welcome to join us. It's open to anybody. But I was listening to some of the conversation and some of the prayers people were having, and they were just talking about how Satan's doing this, or he's tempting me here, he's doing this. And I asked at one point, I said, it feels kind of like, one, you're giving him way too much credit, and two, he can't be everywhere. Satan isn't omnipresent like our God is. So he can't be tempting you here and then you over here at the same he just can't do that. He can't be everywhere at once. And the room got silent, and I'm getting chills thinking about it again because each person was like, I never knew that. If you didn't know that, how does that change everything for you? Because we know that we have a God that can be everywhere. He can be in your suffering and in your suffering at the same time, and he can be celebrating another life moment with somebody else. And he can be everywhere. And that's good news. And we just can't give Satan too much credit. I will leave it at that. I don't think I need to expound upon that more. That we serve a God that is everywhere and is always present in every single situation that we are in. We can call to him. All we have to do is simply call on his name. So God is sovereign. Satan must ask permission. Job never sees this heavenly conversation. So I think that's an important observation to make. We're reading about this, but Job has no idea all of this stuff is going on. So the reason for his suffering is hidden from him. And that's important to remember because we're watching how he's still choosing to worship God. It's not like he got a little sneak peek. He's the Lord and Satan had this conversation. He's going to tempt me. He's going to test me. Now, I know that there's boundaries. I know that I didn't do anything wrong. He isn't getting any of that. He simply is going through it. He's in the midst of his suffering, and he's still turning and looking to God. So important things for us to remember about this is that we rarely know the why behind our suffering. And I think oftentimes, and maybe you've said it yourself, we think about okay, when I get to heaven, I can't wait to ask God why. And I want you to just consider that you're not going to care at that point. And that may sound harsh, but I think sometimes we get so caught up in wanting to know the answer to why that we miss out on being with him and trusting in him in the process. And trusting that when the story is complete and we are in heaven with him, literally all of our worries will wash away in a blink of an eye. It's just not going to matter. Those things that we place so much emphasis on right now will be but a blip, and they will be so far behind us because we'll have his glory and his love shining bright in front of us, and we'll be able to walk into what life was always meant to be. God may always be God may be doing something larger than our personal comfort. And again, that's also kind of like, ooh, but God, don't you want me to be comfortable? He does, to some degree. But he also knows that we're in a broken world and things aren't going to look like how we always want them to look. But he still promises to be with us. Now, a lack of explanation does not mean that there is a lack of purpose. A truth that I have held on to throughout all of my life is that he is a God that wastes nothing. Absolutely nothing. He can use any situation, any loss, any hardship, any setback, any of it he can use. And again, it may not come out in a way that you expected or you hoped for, but I can promise you, you can be better off on the other side if you just allow him to do the work in and through you. And it may not feel good, and it may be really hard, and you may cry, and you may yell, and you may scream, and you may sing, "Why God?" But he is sovereign, he is faithful, and he will waste nothing. Now, the hardest part of this story, this is point 3, the devastation of sudden loss. Suffering can be overwhelming and layered. We see it here in Job. It literally goes block by block of like somebody's coming in and rushing in and telling them, hey, your family was in the house and the wind blew and it tore down the house and your family members are dead. Hey, this field, your crops, the people came in and they took the camels. Like, there's all these things that are layered that are happening back to back to back. And obviously in this context, we don't know like how quickly these things were. But we've been in seasons where we feel like things are maybe back to back where you're like, can I catch a break? Like, can we just catch our breath for a minute? God, I can't handle anymore. And so I just, like, Job loses his wealth, he loses his servants, he loses his children. I'm going back to my notes because I get excited about this part and I don't want to get too far off track, so bear with me here. He loses his health. These disasters come in waves. There's emotional, financial, physical suffering, and they're all combined at one time. And it feels catastrophic. Sometimes suffering is not just mild. It feels like it's going to take you out. And the thing that we don't do well, which will lead into this next point, but sometimes we miss out on like biblical grieving. Biblical grieving, it doesn't slap a Band-Aid on a situation. It doesn't say like, oh, God's faithful, keep going. Like, people waited. And when I mean waited, I'm talking like, put your waders on, you're in the water. Like, they waited in the grief of the moment, of whatever somebody was experiencing. And it was uncomfortable because you never knew what moment somebody was going to experience, if it was going to be like sadness, or if it was going to be anger, or if they were going to be numb or apathetic. Like, but whatever it was, people entered in and they waited for that person, now W-A-I-T-E-D, waited for people to go through this process of grieving. Like, when we lose something that's valuable to us, like, it hurts. And we know that, and we've experienced that in different levels, but we want other people to acknowledge and see, like, yeah, that hurts. And it's not enough to be like, I can't imagine what that's like for you. It's like, let me sit. Let me just experience for a moment, what is it like to be you right now? How do I enter into this with you right now in a way that you experience and see that you are so loved, that your grief isn't too much? It's part of what it looks like to live on this earth right now. Like, I just think we need to do a better job of that. What does it look like to actually grieve well with people when they're in the midst of their suffering? And the key with this is like, if we can do that well, there's going to be a turning point. There's going to be a moment where someone turns and looks to you and is like, now what? And the people that those people will be able to hear in that now what moment are the ones that have sat there, the ones that have been through it with them. Not the people that want to come in for this, like swoop in for that quick answer of like, okay, well, if you do this, and you'll get back on your feet and you'll feel better. Like the people that have heard you, sat with you, felt the weight, the heaviness with you, those are the people that you're going to turn to and look for answers. And that's going to be the opportunity where you'll be able to always point back to our Father. But sometimes it's hard to hear that message from people that just come in and haven't done the work. Now, the fourth point here is a God-centered response to suffering, which I kind of touched on a little bit already, but the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's what we see Job saying here. He grieves, he tears his robe, he shaves his head, he worships, he speaks truth about God's sovereignty. And there was a couple of things I was going back and forth with this where it's like he's speaking God's truth in the moment that he needs to hear it most. And I don't know exactly where Job was at in this moment, if he was trying to speak truth until it settled into his heart and he knew it deep down, or if that truth was coming out of he's walked and done some life, and in the moment that he needed to remember most, he was able to speak truth about God. And I think could be a little bit of both of those things, but that's the challenge for us is like, are we able to walk this walk in the moments when life is good so that when life isn't as good or life is downright bad, we can still know and remember what is true about God. It's not suddenly going to this book and looking and being like, okay, shoot, what does it say about this? Or what does God do what is God going to say about this? Like, we can already know it. And that's one of the really beautiful things about this church is you guys read through the Bible on a regular basis together. It's become a habit. It's part of who you are. It's part of your DNA. This is a very life source. It is the thing that actually renews us when we feel like we have nothing left. Some things to notice about Job in this passage is that he does not curse God. He does not demand an explanation. And he anchors himself in who God is. Now, things for us to just remember out of this is that worship is not based on circumstances, which we've said. Mature faith grieves honestly, but trusts deeply. Mature faith grieves honestly, but trusts deeply. He can handle your tears. He can handle your anger. He wants to know how you feel. He already knows how you feel. Bring it to him, and yet don't let your trust in him waver. And the last is that we can worship while we weep. So this is what it looks like for us to consider how to suffer well. But the other part of this, the last part of it, I mentioned to you guys in the beginning that his friends got it right in this part. They don't get it right later on. But what does it look like for us to suffer with others well? And I'm going to come back to this point, and I know I touched on it a little bit because I veered off, but it's so important. The ministry of presence is so important. His friends, they sit with him for 7 days in silence. I don't know how many of you guys, we sit in here, right, and you guys are silent for an hour, but you're listening to someone talk. If you actually had to think about like sitting in a space with someone you know who is hurting and being completely silent, might be kind of awkward. Might be kind of hard. You might want to check your phone. You might want to go for a walk. You might want to get something to eat, right? There's all these things sometimes when we sit, we have to sit so still and enter into something that's just a little bit different than our regular routine. We're uncomfortable, and yet that uncomfortableness is actually what can bring exactly what somebody needs in that moment. And so it's important that we learn how to sit with people in silence. His friends, they weep with him. They're sad. I'm sure if they're his friends and, his kids, they've seen them, they've watched them grow up, they weep, they mourn, but the most important thing is that they say nothing. And ironically, this is going to be their finest moment because the rest of the book they spend time trying to tell Job, like, you've done something, you need to repent. Whatever it is that you've done, you need to figure it out and just, tell God so that he can forgive you and move on and restore you. And Job continues to not listen to them because that's not actually accurate. But the best response that we can have is to deep suffering is often silent presence. Explanations can wait. Advice can wait. Compassion always precedes correction. Jesus always met people with compassion before correction. Jesus. And so if Jesus did that, hate to break it to you, means probably that you're not qualified to give some correction before you do the compassion part. Now, I have been reading through the children's Bible with my son, and at the end of each story, I caught on to it. It has been bringing back to the good news. It brings it back to the good news of the gospel. And I've been struck by that because obviously, we know, everything should always point back to Jesus, the good news. And yet, even passages in the Old Testament, because that's where we are right now, because we read David and Goliath every day. If somebody sees my son, you can tell him. I've been, sidebar here, but he keeps dressing up and he wants to be the giant and he wants my daughter to be Goliath. And I keep saying, I think we need to read the story again because I think you're missing the point if you want to be the giant. But okay, that's all right, Jed. Figure it out someday. But at the end of each story, it mentions the good news. And so as we reflect on that today with Job, that Jesus is always ultimately the answer. We see that Job is a shadow kind of pointing forward. Both were righteous. Both suffered, even though they were innocent. Both were tested. Both were publicly humiliated. But this is the key point. Christ suffered not only as a test, but he suffered as a substitute. And that's the good news. Our substitute died on our behalf as the perfect substitution. So unlike Job, Jesus knew the full cup of suffering. So he had the whole behind the veil story, right? He knew the conversation happening in heaven and how it impacted him down on earth, and he still said, "Thy will be done." Jesus bore wrath, not just loss. Jesus makes the ultimate sense of innocent suffering, right? Even though we see that Job hasn't really done anything, we still know that he's human, and so he still has sinned, and so he's not perfect like Jesus was. So at the cross, we can learn that God is not distant from suffering. He enters into it. And again, that just points back to this very beautiful truth that he wastes nothing. So this morning, we can know that when suffering comes, you may not know why. You may not see the spiritual battle that's happening, but our awareness of it happening can allow for us to pray and know how to pray. You may lose more than you ever imagined possible, but you can still know this. God is still sovereign, he is still worthy, and he is ever present. Sometimes our greatest act of faith is simply this: blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. We can call on him. Now, I've seen this reality lived out time and time again in my own life and close people that I live with or know and love, but at Hope Street. I've heard stories. I've seen things that have happened. Oftentimes, much of it leaves me with my mouth open, just completely saddened. That's probably putting it lightly, at some of the suffering that is happening in our world. But in light of that, too, I've also seen some of the most beautiful moments of those people clinging to a hope that they have. And so this morning I'm going to share, you guys can tune up to the video here. We're going to watch a video of my friend Kelly and a little bit of her story. And I will warn you a little bit, I think all of our little kiddos kind of went out. There's an intense part of her story. So just to prepare your heart in that, but there is a hope, and so I want to be able to share this with you guys.
Hope is a feeling of expectation and desire for something to happen. As kids, we hope for simple things: fun, happiness, food. As a kid, my hopes were varied. My mom was always a good person, but my dad, I never did visit his grave. I was surrounded by hurt that I didn't understand, so I kept running from the pain. I fell in love with an older man and did everything I could to blend with him and his friends. When I had my first child, my mother had to tell him I was only 14 years old. 5 kids later, by the time I was 23, things became so bad. The abuse and the drugs, they suppressed things. I would not think about what I needed to do, going to school, working, and praying to God. I turned dates on the street, selling my body. Hope was nearly invisible. I was in and out of rehab, sometimes for my mom and my kids. Never could I wanted it for me. It didn't work. For 20 years, I couldn't break addiction. I lost my kids and ran out of places to run. One night, everything changed. I sat on the porch of a drug house on 6th Street. The father of my kids stole a radio from a car in front of their house. The owner of the car and his friends came after me. They kidnapped me, forced me into the trunk of their car, and for the rest of the night they beat and raped me. Hope was invisible. When I woke, I knew I needed help. I was so tired of my life and the fear I was from. I knew it was time to listen to people who wanted to help me. I chose rehab. This time, I really wanted to go. They gave me the tools that I needed to stay clean. 90 days later, the doors started closing on me. All except one. The door was open at Hope Street.
For most of her life, she believed the lies that she couldn't go to school.
Couldn't hold a job, couldn't be a mom.
I believed I was worth nothing.
Those lies were disrupted when she walked into Hope Street.
She encountered a new reality that showed her she was not defined by the people who hurt her, by the things she did, or the things that were done to her.
The power of those lies got weaker, and hope started to shine through. It wasn't just the people and the culture that gave me hope. The real hope came from the one whom those people and things pointed to. The one who knew my name before my mother spoke it over me. The Creator who knows all of our names. He knows the real me, the real you, and still chooses to love us perfectly. He is my new hope, our new hope.
He pulls the lies from our hearts and minds so we can see ourselves and the people around us.
I've seen that video so many times, and it still always brings tears to my eyes. And I want to just point out, yeah, she's talking about Hope Street and how Hope Street has impacted her. But more than that, which is why I love Hope Street so much, I guess I work there, but is that people find hope in the midst of the most dire situations. They're reminded of what's true of God. And that's what we can do here as a community. We can be a place where it's safe to show up just as you are. It is safe to come if you're in the midst of your most trying season. It's safe to come in the midst of a season where you've welcomed new life or you're experiencing joy, all of it. None of it is too much. This gets to be a place where he gets to meet you here, and you get to meet other people who are willing to walk with you, sit with you, rejoice with you, cry with you. That is what the community of God is for. And that's what we do at Hope Street. It's not any more special than that. It's just this place that is chosen to show up and be what it is that God has asked us to be. And you guys, as a church here at Mosaic, we get to do the same thing. And so you may not understand your suffering. You may not see at all what God is doing. But like Job, you can choose to trust the character of God even when you can't trust or can't trace the hand of God. And so the worship team, I believe, is going to come up for one final song, and then afterwards we will pray, and then hopefully we get another fun day of sun, I hope.
Once again, thank you for listening. If you live in Southeast Wisconsin, we'd love to connect with you at our Sunday gatherings. To stay up to date with all things Mosaic, follow us on social media or visit us at mosaicwi.com.